Bueno, estamos con Peter Kragh, él es buzo profesional, camarógrafo. Y how could you define yourself as a professional?
I am a professional underwater cinematographer. I work for companies like the BBC, National Geographic, Discovery, IMAX Corporation, anybody who makes films in and around the ocean.
And for how long have you been doing that activity?
I started out as a dive instructor, dive master on a boat in Costa Rica. I was there for 6 years. And down there I started taking pictures, I started shooting video, and so I learned about how to compose and do pictures. And then I got a job offer about 22, 23 years ago to come to the States and help out a cinematographer who lived up there.
Then you have had the opportunity to visit again certain places that you can realize how was before and then how are in the present. Like, I don't know, maybe Costa Rica. What other spots you could say that you have visited after 7 years?
One of the places that I worked as a dive master was Cocos Island in Costa Rica, which is a World Heritage Site.
It's a national park, it's a marine.
It's a national park and it's a UN World Heritage Site. So it's one of the highest levels of protections, one of the most unique places, and this is recognized for the amount of life there is in and around the ocean, rather than what's the terrestrial stuff on the island. So on that island, I've seen it extensively for these 6 years that I worked down there, and having gone back 15 years later, the amount of life that was there, even though this is a protected area, there's no fishing allowed, the life has changed a lot. You'd go out 25 years ago and you'd see 200 hammerhead sharks or 100 white-tip reef sharks or 5,000 big-eyed yaks. And now you go down there and maybe you see a group of 20 hammerheads. So you see 10 or 20 white-tip reef sharks, and you see a school of maybe 500 big-eyed yaks. So even this place that is as protected as anything gets has seen the impacts of humans, basically, whether it's fishing in and around the island or it's fish that travel out and get caught outside away from the island. It's
the human pressure definitely is affecting even more than the global warming, you'd say, or both. There are factors, elements.
I think the things that influence how things develop or degrade is a combination of things. There's no doubt some places are hit very hard by fishing pressure, and that can be the primary source in one place. In other places it might be tourist boat traffic that add to the stress of the animals, and then maybe they have miscarriages, or they seek other places to go. Other places it can be the food source that's moving due to climate change, and therefore there's not as much food. For example, the gray whales, they don't have the same feeding opportunities in Alaska as they used to, so they have to roam around more to find their food. So it can be many things, and it can be many combination of many different things that influence the animals, the fish in the ocean.
Would you tell us what had been your experience in the Sea of Cortez? How many times you've been diving in this area?
I started diving up here in 2001, 2002, and I was back in the day when the Humboldt squids were in big amounts up off Santa Rosalia and Loreto. Those ones have completely gone away. Nobody catches Humboldt squids in the Sea of Cortez. I can't say why that is. It's just they're not here anymore. The reefs up in that area had a good amount of reef life, a good amount of sea fans, and fairly healthy looking, at least for me as a first-time observer of it. And in later years, it seems like the volume of fish that's there has certainly gone down, of the reef fish, which probably experience some of these things we talked about. It's whether it's fishing pressure or climate change,
illegal fishing,
could be
overfishing also.
Could be. I mean, overfishing is something that hits oceans and seas
Everywhere,
all over the world.
everywhere.
It's not specifically to
So
here.
how can could we deal with the economical community, because to ban or even to create an image that this place like the Espiritu Santo National Marine Park is in the list of the green list of the Union of International Conservative for Nature. Even with that, they feel like they are being restricted too much. What
Right.
would you say? Because it's difficult. It's understandable that they need to survive, like fishermen, the riverreños,
Yep.
fishermen, the small business for tourism and for sport fishing and also for spear fishing. I mean, there are many activities like it's growing, and they feel that they're being attacked. But what would you say to have a better world for the next generation?
I think there's a very good. You can take some pages out of the playbook that's being used in Southern and Central California. The creation of the MPAs, the Marine Protected Areas, where there's no fishing, there's no sports fishing, there's no commercial fishing allowed. I dive up at the Channel Islands. I live in Southern California, and when you go to a place like Santa Barbara, it's a small island, maybe 2 miles long, 1.5 miles wide, and maybe 20% of the southeastern corner is an MPA. And when you go there, you see an abundance of fish, and fish that have a different personality. They're not afraid, they come out. But the sheepheads, if you dive in La Jolla further south, you get the sheepheads like this, 18 inches. If you go up there, you've got good fat 24, 30-inch sheepheads. So that gives you an ability to create a stock population of fish in an MPA like this that can then spawn, reproduce, and then from there they can spread around to the rest of the island. And the fishing right next to the MPA is much better than it used to be. And fishermen are realizing that it was a fight for California to enforce these MPAs in California, because fishermen didn't like it, that they would be cut off. Now, later, the fishermen realized that this is actually good for them in the long run, because there's now a protected population of fish that can spread out to the neighboring areas. So the fishing has actually gotten better. But it is hard to get over that first hump where you accept that you might give up on the rights to fish in 20% of the island. Because of course you can be afraid that it starts with 20% and then 2 years later you take another 20% and suddenly the whole island is closed, and that can be a difficult first hurdle to get over. Here in Baja you have an excellent example of how it can be turned around in Cabo Pulmo. The only place that I know of that's actually been protected and now is the best dive site in all of the Sea of Cortez. It's right there, and it's because it's been protected for, I don't know how long, was it 20 years, 20, 30 years, but it has now the schools of fish and size of fish. It has a much healthier population of marine animals now than it did before it was protected. But it takes that hump to get over it. The fish don't come back in 6 months or 12 months. It takes a while and got to be established there. So it's a long-term approach to it. It would be fantastic if you could do something similar at the national park over here, Batida and Espiritu Santo, and protect certain areas. If ideally you'd protect the whole thing. That might be harder, but if you can protect at least areas that has a certain size to them, and say no fishing, no nothing allowed there.
Talking about the present, what have been your experience in these 7 days aboard of this wonderful expedition? What could you see? How can you describe the dives and in 7 days in
Yeah.
this area of marine life of marine park of Espiritu Santo.
So we've dived in Batida and some of the islands up here, San Jose, all the way up to San Diego up north, and it has been rather discouraging to dive here and see. There is large areas of boulders, but nothing much on them. There will always be some fish left, and we occasionally came across a school of goatfish, or there would be some triggerfish, or the sergeant majors, but very few of the reef predators, like the groupers and the large snappers. So that doesn't make for a healthy ecosystem.
Not even parrot fish.
We've seen some parrotfish, and we've actually seen some nice sized parrotfish, but in
Northern, no?
where?
Northern than the Espiritu
Yes,
Santo.
yes, more up at the more northern islands. Have been a population of parrotfish, whether it's a healthy population or it's very small. I haven't been to many of these sites before, so I don't have a good reference. This is my first reference point. So it could have been, there should have been 10 times as many parrotfish, and the idea of shifting baselines is, this is my baseline now because it's the first time I've been here, but when I talk to people like Mike and Johnny, who's dived here much longer than I have at some of these sites here, they talk about populations being 5-10 times bigger than what they are now.
They finally, based on your experience, long experience diving, what would be the message? Because it's a difficult world, more people, more need to feed them, and to leave the contamination and so also is another factor. And what would be your message to this generation for the next generations?
It's a really tough one. I'm from a country in Europe, Denmark, where we had a big fishing industry back in the 80s, 90s, 70s, where a lot of people were employed in fishing. And the fishing stocks, the cod population totally collapsed. Our domestic waters now have very little fish stocks. And the government went about it by actually buying out the fishermen and saying we can't have all of these fishermen trying to make a living here. So we will buy the boat, we will help them get re-education and move them to different industries. It's very hard, especially if you have people that are 40 years old, 50 years old. Reschooling for another trade is very difficult. It worked in Denmark. It's not a quick solution. It took years, and they started slowly by buying out 5% maybe, I don't know what the numbers are, but a small percentage of the boats, and then giving it a break, and then buying out more boats. So right now the fishing industry is very, very small in Denmark. That could be something that could be tried here. Maybe the amount of fishermen for the available fish stocks that are here is just, they don't match. Too many people trying to make a living from the ocean by fishing with a declining stock of fish is just not workable. You could also try, and there's a fishermen here could potentially get more involved in the tourism industry, work as boat captains in La Paz. Here there's been a booming influx of tourists that are using boats, whether it's for sports fishing, which produces much lower pressure on the fish
or
stocks.
Even tourist rides.
Tourist rides, people snorkeling with the whale sharks or the sea lions, or you could move some of the people over to do these things. It's happened on the Pacific side, where in the bays where the gray whales are coming to visit, a lot of the fishermen over there, at least for those months of the year, they transition over to do tourist rides, and then they don't fish for those months. The gray whales are not here for the whole year, so it doesn't work for the whole year, but it's a place to start where you can get them into other businesses for parts of the year, and maybe you pay them to not go fishing.
Peter Kragh, thank you very much. It has been a pleasure and an honor to have dive with you, Johnny, here.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you.